The transport ship docked at Station Veridax with a soft hum. Park Do-hyun stood near the exit door, his heart beating fast in his chest. Through the small window, he could see the massive space station stretching out in all directions. Lights blinked everywhere. Ships of all sizes moved around like fish in a dark ocean. This was the home of the Galactic Military Academy, the most famous military school in 3 galaxies. And he was about to become its first human student. The door opened with a hiss. Cold air rushed in, carrying strange smells that Do-hyun could not name. He picked up his single bag and stepped onto the station. Immediately, he felt eyes on him. Dozens of aliens stopped what they were doing to stare. A tall creature with hard shell covering its body clicked its mouthparts together. 2 snake-like beings whispered to each other in frequencies that made Do-hyun's ears hurt. A group of beings with 4 arms each pointed at him without shame. Do-hyun kept walking. He had expected this. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 18 years ago. To these species, who'd been traveling between stars for thousands of years, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. Primitive, simple, barely worth noticing. A robot floated toward him. It spoke in a flat voice. Human designate Park Do-hyun. You will follow this unit to processing. He followed the robot through long hallways. The station was huge, bigger than any city Do-hyun had ever seen. Windows showed views of distant stars and nearby planets. Other students walked past him, most of them ignoring him completely. That was fine. Being ignored was better than being mocked that the processing room was cold and white. Another robot scanned his body, took samples of his blood, and asked him hundreds of questions about human biology. Did humans require oxygen? Yes. Did humans eat organic matter? Yes. Could humans survive in vacuum? No. Definitely not. After 2 hours, he was given a small room in the student housing section. The room was meant for species much larger than humans, so it felt empty and strange. The bed was too hard. The lighting was too bright. But it was his, and that was enough. Do-hyun sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ceiling. He thought about Earth, about the small apartment in Bizen where he grew up. He thought about his mother, who had cried when he left. He thought about his father, who had said nothing at all but had held him tight for a very long time. He was 22 years old. He was millions of light years from home. And tomorrow, he would walk into a classroom full of aliens who thought his entire species was worthless. Do-hyun smiled to himself. This was going to be interesting. The next morning, he woke up early. He put on the gray uniform that all students wore and made his way to Lecture Hall 7. The hallways were busier now. Students rushed past him, talking in languages he could not understand. Some of them laughed when they saw him. Others made sounds that might have been insults. He found the lecture hall and stopped at the entrance. It was a massive room, shaped like a bowl. Rows of seats went down toward a central platform where the professor would stand. Hundreds of students were already inside, filling the seats with colors and shapes that hurt Do-hyun's eyes. At the platform stood a creature that looked like a giant snake. Its scales were deep green, and its eyes were yellow with black slits. It noticed Do-hyun immediately. The human may sit in the back, the creature announced. Its voice was cold and sharp, like breaking ice. Do-hyun nodded and began walking down the aisle. Every head turned to watch him. Clicking sounds, hissing sounds, rumbling sounds followed him as he moved. He kept his eyes forward, and his face calm. Near the back, he found an empty seat next to a being with 4 arms and smooth gray skin. She was smaller than the others of her kind, and she watched Do-hyun with what looked like curiosity instead of disgust. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. "It is not," she replied. Her voice was soft and musical. "You may sit." He sat down. The seat was uncomfortable, designed for a body shaped differently than his. But he did not complain. "I am called Yuna," the four-armed being said. "I chose this name because your human names are easier for others to speak. My true name has sounds your mouth cannot make. I am Park Doyon. Thank you for the welcome. I did not welcome you. I simply told you my name." But there was something like a smile on her face. The professor began speaking. His name was Krulvax, and he was a Voss, one of the snake-like species that had helped build most of the galaxy's warships. He spoke about the history of space warfare, about battles fought long before humans had learned to make fire. Doyon listened carefully and took notes. He noticed that many students did not pay attention. They whispered to each other or played with devices hidden under their desks. But he wrote down everything. Every name. Every date. Every detail. After the lecture, Yuna walked beside him in the hallway. "You take many notes," she observed. "I have much to learn." "That is true. Humans are very far behind." She said this without cruelty, just as a fact. "But I find your species interesting. You grew very fast. Too fast, some say. What do you mean?" "Your people went from simple machines to starships in a very short time. My people took 10,000 years to do the same. You did it in 200. She tilted her head, studying him. Many wonder how this is possible. Doyon thought about his answer. "We had help," he said finally. "We kept almost killing ourselves. War, sickness, pollution. Every time we came close to ending everything, we had to grow faster to survive. That seems like a poor way to advance." "Maybe, but it worked." They reached a point where their paths separated. Yuna paused and looked at him with her large, dark eyes. "The other students will not be kind to you," she said. "They think humans are weak and stupid. They think you do not belong here. Do you think that?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think that any species which almost destroys itself many times and still survives must have some quality worth studying. I have not decided what that quality is yet." She walked away, leaving Doyon alone in the crowded hallway. Over the following days, Doyon learned the rhythm of life at the academy. He woke early. He attended lectures. He studied late into the night. The other students continued to ignore him or mock him. The professors treated him like he was invisible, calling on him only when they wanted to embarrass him. But Doyon did not let this bother him. He had faced worse things on Earth. He had grown up poor in a country that was still recovering from division. He had worked 3 jobs to pay for his education. He had watched friends give up and disappear into lives of quiet failure. This was nothing. This was just people underestimating him. And Doyon had learned long ago that being underestimated was a gift. 3 weeks after his arrival, Professor Krulvax announced that the class would begin studying the Damari Dreadnought. This was the most powerful warship ever built. It had ended wars in hours. No enemy had ever survived a battle against it. A hologram appeared in the center of the lecture hall. The ship was shaped like a curved blade, covered in weapons and glowing with power. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "This vessel is perfect," Krulvax said, pride thick in his voice. "It has no weakness. It cannot be defeated." Doyon looked at the hologram. He looked at the curves and angles, the weapons and shields, the glowing sections and dark panels. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that nothing was ever perfect. For 3 weeks, the class studied the Damari Dreadnought. Every lecture, Professor Krulvax showed them a new system. The shields that could stop any weapon. The cannons that could break moons into pieces. The engines that could move the massive ship faster than anything its size should move. Every lecture, he reminded them that this ship was the greatest achievement in military history. Doyon sat in the back and watched and listened. He took notes like he always did, filling page after page with drawings and numbers. But more than that, he observed. He watched how the other students reacted. He watched how the professor spoke. He watched the hologram spin slowly in the center of the room, showing every angle of the great warship. The other students seemed bored. They had grown up hearing stories about the dreadnought. To them, it was like hearing about the sun. Yes, it was powerful. Yes, it was important. But there was nothing new to learn. The ship was perfect, and that was the end of the story. But Dayan did not think that way. On Earth, he had learned that nothing was perfect. Every machine broke eventually. Every wall had a crack somewhere. Every system had a point where it could fail. This was true for cars and computers and bridges. Why would it be different for a spaceship? He began studying the dreadnought in his own time. He requested access to the technical documents stored in the Academy's database. The librarian, a floating creature made of light, seemed surprised that a human would want such advanced information. But the rules said any student could access these files, so it gave him permission. Night after night, Do-Hyun sat in his small room and read. The documents were long and complex, filled with words he did not know. But he kept reading. He used translation programs. He watched old lectures from previous years. He studied until his eyes hurt, and his head felt heavy. Yuna found him in the meal hall one evening, staring at a tablet while his food grew cold. "You are always working," she said, sitting across from him. "The other students say you are trying to prove something." "I am trying to learn something." "What is there to learn?" "The dreadnought has been studied for 300 years. Every great mind in the galaxy has looked at it. What do you think you will find that they did not?" Do-Hyun looked up from his tablet. "I do not know yet. Maybe nothing. But I cannot stop looking." Yuna made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Humans are strange. You work so hard for things that may not exist. That is how we found fire, and wheels, and medicine, and spaceships." Do-Hyun smiled slightly. "We keep looking even when there is nothing to find. Sometimes we find something anyway." She studied him for a long moment. Her forearms were folded in a way that suggested deep thought. "My people are builders. We create things. We understand materials and structures. But we do not think like you do. We build what is needed. We do not question what already works. And that is why your people make wonderful engineers." "Yes, but perhaps that is also why we miss things." She leaned forward, her dark eyes reflecting the lights of the meal hall. "What are you looking for in the dreadnought?" Do-Hyun thought about how to explain. On Earth, there was a great ship called the Titanic. It was the largest ship ever built at that time. Everyone said it was perfect. They said it could never sink. Do you know what happened? It sank? Yes, on its first voyage. Because the builders were so sure it was perfect that they did not prepare for problems. They did not bring enough lifeboats. They ignored warnings about ice in the water. The ship hit the ice and broke apart, and many people died. Yuna was quiet. "Every time humans say something is perfect," Do-Hyun continued, "it means we have stopped looking for problems. And that is when problems find us." After that conversation, Yuna began helping him. She understood engineering better than he did, and she could explain the technical details that confused him. They spent many evenings together, going through the dreadnought systems piece by piece. "The shields are remarkable," Yuna explained one night. "They create a field of energy around the entire ship. Nothing can pass through except at very specific frequencies." "What about heat?" Do-Hyun asked. "Heat. The ship has a main cannon that can break moons. That must create enormous heat. Where does the heat go?" Yuna pulled up another document. "Here, the cooling system. It moves heat away from the cannon through special channels. Then it releases the heat into space through vents. Dawn looked at the diagram. 16 vents spread around the lower part of the ship. Lines showed how the heat traveled from the cannon to the vents. The vents release heat constantly? No. The system works in cycles. Heat builds up, then releases, then builds up again. It happens every few seconds. Something flickered in Do-hyun's mind. A connection he could not quite see yet. And the shields? What happens to them when the heat releases? Yuna checked another document. Her face changed slightly. The shields reduce power in those areas. Just for a moment. To prevent interference with the heat release. By how much? 12%. 12%, Do-hyun repeated softly. He looked at the diagram again. 16 vents. A cycle that repeated every few seconds. A reduction in shield power at specific points. Why does this matter? Yuna asked. I do not know yet. But the connection in his mind was growing clearer. Show me the timing. Exactly how long is the cycle? She found the number. 4.7 seconds. The heat releases from all vents at the same moment, every 4.7 seconds. Do-hyun stared at the diagram. His heart was beating faster now. Every 4.7 seconds, he said. The shields weaken in 16 specific places. And this happens every time the ship fires its main cannon. Yes, but the window is very small. Less than half a second. And the shield only drops by 12% in those areas. An attack would need to be perfectly timed and perfectly aimed. But it could be done. Yuna opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She looked at the diagram again. Her forearms moved nervously. In theory, she admitted. In theory, yes. If someone knew the exact timing and had weapons fast enough to hit those points during the window. But no pilot could react that quickly. No organic brain could calculate the timing in battle. What about a machine? A computer program? A simple program could predict the cycle. The timing never changes. It cannot change, or the cannon would overheat. Her voice was becoming quieter. If someone programmed missiles or drones to follow the pattern, they could strike during the window. Do-hyun sat back in his chair. The room felt different now. The air felt heavier. The dreadnought is not perfect, he said. Yuna looked at him with something like fear in her eyes. You cannot tell anyone this. The Voss designed this ship. It is their greatest pride. If you suggest there is a flaw, they will destroy you. But if there is a flaw, people need to know. What if the enemy discovers this before we do? The enemy? The Damari. The ones the dreadnought was built to fight. What if they are already looking for weaknesses? What if they find this before anyone else? Yuna had no answer. She simply stared at the diagram. At the 16 points, where the greatest warship in the galaxy was not as strong as everyone believed. The next class session. Professor Krelvax announced that he would take questions about the dreadnought. This was a formality. No student ever challenged the official information. No one ever questioned the perfect design. Do-hyun raised his hand, and the room fell completely silent. Every head in the lecture hall turned toward the back row. Hundreds of eyes, some with strange shapes and colors, all focused on the human with his hand raised. The silence was so deep that Do-hyun could hear his own heartbeat. Professor Krelvax coiled his long body tighter around the instructor's platform. His yellow eyes narrowed into thin lines. His forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air as if searching for the smell of trouble. The human has a question, he said. The words dripped with disbelief. Do-hyun stood. He could feel Yuna's eyes on him, warning him to stop. But he had thought about this for days. He had checked his calculations again and again. He was sure. Not a question, Professor. An observation. An observation. Krelvax made a sound like rocks grinding together. The human, who comes from a species that discovered space travel less than 20 years ago, has an observation about a warship designed by the finest minds in the galaxy. Someone laughed. Then others joined. The sound filled the hall like a wave. Do-yoon waited until the laughter died. His face remained calm. Inside, his heart was pounding hard enough to hurt. Yes, Professor. I believe the dreadnought has a weakness. The laughter stopped immediately. Now the silence was different. It was the silence of shock, of disbelief, of something that should not be possible. Kralvak's scales rippled. This was how the Voss showed extreme emotion. It can mean anger or amusement or both. You believe, the professor said slowly, that you have found something that our engineers missed for 300 years. Yes, and you wish to share this discovery with us. Yes, another ripple passed through Kralvak's scales. He looked around the lecture hall at the hundreds of students watching this strange moment. Very well, human. Come forward. Show us this weakness you have found. Do-hyun walked down the aisle. Students moved away from him as he passed, as if his foolishness might be contagious. He reached the central platform and stood beside the hologram of the dreadnought. May the first use the controls? He asked. Kralvak nodded once. His eyes never left Do-hyun's face. Do-hyun touched the controls and the hologram responded. He zoomed in on the lower section of the ship, where the curved blade shape was widest. 16 small openings became visible, spread evenly around the hull. The thermal exhaust vents, Do-hyun said. His voice was steady, though his hands wanted to shake. They release heat from the main cannon's cooling system. Everyone knows this. Kralvak hissed. Yes, but not everyone has looked closely at how they work. Do-hyun pulled up a new layer on the hologram. Lines of color appeared, showing heat moving through the ship. The cooling system collects heat from the cannon and moves it through these channels to the vents. The heat releases every 4.7 seconds from all 16 vents at the same moment. This is basic engineering. It prevents the cannon from overheating. Correct. But during the release, the shields must reduce power in the areas around each vent. Otherwise, the heat would interfere with shield function. The room was completely still. Even the students who had laughed before were now leaning forward, listening. Do-hyun added another layer to the hologram. Shield power levels appeared as a blue glow around the ship. He started a simulation. The glow pulsed slightly every 4.7 seconds. And at each pulse, 16 small areas showed a decrease in brightness. 12% power reduction, Do-hyun said. Every 4.7 seconds. At these exact locations. Kralvak's tongue flicked rapidly. 12% is nothing. The shields are still more than strong enough to stop any weapon. Yes, if you fire one weapon at one location. But what if you fire multiple weapons at multiple locations at exactly the right moment? He changed the simulation again. Small dots appeared around the dreadnought, representing missiles or drones. They held position for a moment, then all struck at exactly the same time, hitting the 16 weak points during the brief window of reduced shield power. In the simulation, the shields flickered. Small breaches appeared. More weapons followed through the breaches. The timing would need to be perfect, Do-hyun continued. No living pilot could calculate it fast enough. But a computer program could. The cycle is completely predictable. It never changes. It cannot change, or the cannon would overheat. Kralvak was no longer rippling. He had gone completely still, which was somehow more frightening. You were saying, he spoke slowly, carefully, that a programmed attack using cheap drones could breach the shields of a dreadnought. I am saying it is possible. The enemy would need to study the ship first to learn the exact timing. They would need many drones, probably hundreds. Many would be destroyed before they could attack. But if enough survived to strike at the right moment, they could create openings. And openings are all an enemy needs. A Krellian student in the front row made a clicking sound. The Dreadnought's weapons would destroy the drones before they got close. Some of them, yes. Most of them, probably. But drones are cheap. A Dreadnought is expensive. If it takes 1,000 drones to destroy one Dreadnought, that is still a good trade for the attacker. Another student, one of the Serpentine Voss, raised a question. Why would anyone send drones against a Dreadnought? They would be destroyed. To find the pattern, Do-hyun replied. The first wave of drones would not try to attack. They would just watch. They would measure the thermal releases and record the timing. Then they would transmit that information before they were destroyed. The second wave would use that information to time their attack. The room was silent again. But this silence was different. It was the silence of people thinking, calculating, realizing. Krelvax finally spoke. His voice was cold as the space between stars. This is theory. Wild speculation from an untrained mind. The Dreadnought has never been defeated. Your ideas mean nothing against 300 years of proven success. The Dreadnought has never been defeated because no one has tried this method, Do-hyun said. And maybe no one ever will. Maybe the Damari are not clever enough to find this pattern. Maybe they do not think the way humans think. And how do humans think? Do-hyun looked at the professor, at the ancient predator eyes that had seen more battles than Do-hyun could imagine. We think like prey, he said. For most of our history, we were not the strongest or the fastest. We survived by finding patterns. When does the predator sleep? When does the river flood? Where are the dangerous places? We watched. We learned. We found the weaknesses in things that were stronger than us. He gestured at the hologram. This ship is beautiful. It is powerful. It is the work of brilliant minds. But every brilliant mind has blind spots. They build things to be strong, not to be broken. They do not think about how an enemy would see their creation. And you do? I have to. Humans always have to. It is how we survived long enough to reach the stars. Krelvax stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to the class. Leave, he commanded. All of you. This session is over. Students began moving toward the exits, whispering to each other. Yuna caught Do-hyun's eye from across the room. Her expression was impossible to read. When the hall was empty except for Do-hyun and the professor, Krelvax spoke again. You should not have done this. Human, I know. The Voss designed the Dreadnought. It is our legacy, our pride. You have just told a room full of future officers that our greatest achievement has a flaw. I did not create the flaw. I only found it. That does not matter. Krelvax moved closer, his massive form towering over Do-hyun. What matters is what happens now. This information cannot be ignored. It will spread. The High Command will hear of it, and they will want to speak with you. Do-hyun felt fear then, real fear. But he did not step back. Then let them speak with me. If I am wrong, they can prove it. If I am right, they should know. Krelvax studied him with those ancient yellow eyes. And slowly, something changed in his expression. Not respect, exactly, but perhaps a hint of recognition. You are either very brave or very stupid, human. On Earth, we often cannot tell the difference. The professor made that grinding sound again. This time, it might have been laughter. We will see which one you are soon enough. The admirals do not like being surprised, and you have just given them a very unpleasant surprise. He turned and left the hall, leaving Do-hyun alone with the hologram of the great warship, still spinning slowly in the empty room. The summons came 3 days later. Do-hyun was in his room, studying as usual, when a security officer appeared at his door. The officer was a Krellian, tall and covered in hard shell armor that clicked when he moved. Human designate Park Do-hyun. You will come with me. It was not a request. They walked through corridors that Do-hyun had never seen before. These halls were wider and more decorated than the student areas. Symbols on the walls showed the crests of different species and military units. Guards stood at every intersection, watching with suspicious eyes. Finally, they reached a great door made of dark metal. It opened silently, revealing a chamber that took Do-hyun's breath away. The room was circular and huge. At the center was a raised platform where Do-hyun would stand. Around this platform, rising up in tiers, sat the admirals of the Galactic Fleet. There were 7 of them, each from a different species. Their uniforms were covered with medals and symbols of rank. Their faces showed nothing but cold judgment. Do-hyun walked to the platform. His footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. The highest seat belonged to a Krellian, admiral so old that his shell had turned pale gray. He looked down at Do-hyun with eyes that had seen the birth and death of empires. Human, the old admiral rumbled. You stand before the high command of the Galactic Fleet. Do you understand why you are here? I believe I am here because of my observations about the Damari dreadnought. Your accusations, a voice hissed. This came from the Voss Admiral, a creature even larger than Professor Krolvax. You accused the Voss of building a flawed warship. I made no accusations. I only shared my analysis. Your analysis suggests that our engineers, with 300 years of experience, missed something that a human child found in 3 weeks. The Voss Admiral's scales were rippling violently. This is an insult to our entire species. A calmer voice spoke next. This came from a Talani admiral, a female with gray skin and forearms folded thoughtfully. Do-hyun recognized the species. She was like Yuna. Admiral Vrek, please. Let us hear the human's explanation before we judge him. She looked at Do-hyun with curious eyes. Tell us, human. How did you come to this conclusion? Do-hyun took a breath. This was his chance. Maybe his only chance. Honored admirals, I mean no disrespect to the Voss or their engineering. The dreadnought is a remarkable achievement. But where I come from, we have a saying. Nothing is perfect. Every system has a weakness. Our job is to find that weakness before our enemies do. And you believe you found such a weakness, the old Krellian said. Yes, the thermal exhaust cycle creates a predictable pattern. During each release, the shields briefly weaken at specific points. An enemy who understood this pattern could time an attack to exploit those weak points. The Voss Admiral made a harsh sound. Impossible. The timing window is too small. No attack could be so precisely coordinated. Not by organic pilots, Do-hyun agreed. But by machines, by programmed drones, it would be possible. The cycle is exactly 4.7 seconds. This never changes. A simple computer could track it and coordinate attacks accordingly. The chamber was silent. The admirals looked at each other, communicating in ways Do-hyun could not see. Finally, the Talani admiral spoke again. We have reviewed your analysis, human. We have had our own engineers examine the data. Some of them believe you are wrong. Others believe you may be correct. Do-hyun felt hope rise in his chest. Then you understand why I had to speak. What we understand, the old Krellian interrupted, is that you have created a problem. Even if your analysis is wrong, the fact that you made it public means others will wonder. Our enemies will hear rumors. Doubt will spread. Would you prefer that doubt spread after a dreadnought was destroyed? The room went cold. Even the Voss Admiral stopped his angry rippling. You speak too freely, human, the old Krellian said. Your species has been part of the galactic community for less than 2 decades. You have no right to lecture us on military matters. I have every right. Do-hyun felt something rising in him, something that would not be pushed down. I came to this academy to learn and to serve. I found something that might save lives, and I shared it. That is my duty as a student and as a soldier. You are not a soldier. You are barely a cadet. Then listen to me as a human. My species has fought wars for 10,000 years. We have built weapons that could destroy our entire world, and we almost use them more than once. We know how to find weaknesses, because finding weaknesses is how we survived. He looked around at the admirals, meeting their eyes one by one. The dreadnought was built to be strong. It was not built to be tested by people who think like predators. Your engineers are brilliant, but they think like builders. They ask how to make something powerful. They do not ask how to break something powerful. And humans ask this question? The Talani admiral said. We ask it first. Before we build anything, we imagine how it could be destroyed. It is not pessimism. It is survival. The old Krellian leaned back in his chair. His ancient eyes studied Do-hyun for a long moment. Your species is young and arrogant. You believe your short history of violence makes you wise. Our short history of violence made us careful. There is a difference. More silent communication passed between the admirals. Do-hyun waited, his heart beating fast. Then the Voss admiral spoke. I have a question for the human. If you believe the dreadnought has this weakness, what would you suggest we do? Do-hyun had thought about this. He had spent many nights thinking about it. 3 things. First, redesign the cooling system to randomize the thermal cycle. Instead of every 4.7 seconds exactly, vary the timing. This makes the pattern unpredictable. The Voss admiral made a note. Second, add independent shield generators for the vent areas. These would maintain power even during thermal release. The main shields would still weaken, but a secondary system would cover the gap. Another note. Third, create a new department at this academy. A department focused on finding weaknesses in our own systems before enemies find them. Bring together minds that think differently. Not just engineers who build, but analysts who break. The chamber was quiet. The admirals looked at each other again. The Talani admiral leaned forward. And who would lead this department? Do-hyun hesitated. He had not planned to say this part. But the words came anyway. Someone who thinks like a human. The Voss admiral made a sound of disgust. You suggest we put a human, a first-year student, in charge of questioning our military designs? I suggest you put someone in charge who is trained to find problems. It does not have to be me. But it should be someone who is not afraid to challenge what everyone believes is true. The old Krellian raised one claw, silencing the chamber. We have heard enough. The council will discuss this matter privately. Human, you will return to your quarters and wait for our decision. You will speak to no one about this meeting. Dawn nodded. Yes, Admiral. And human? Yes? The ancient Krellian's expression was unreadable. Whatever we decide, you have shown something today. Courage or foolishness, I cannot say, but something worthy of note. Do-hyun was escorted back to his room. The door closed behind him, and he sat on his bed, staring at the wall. He had done everything he could. He had spoken truth to power. He had offered solutions. Now he could only wait. Hours passed. Then days. He went to classes, but Professor Kralvax would not look at him. Other students whispered when he walked past. Yuna tried to talk to him, but he could not tell her what had happened. On the 5th day, a message arrived. The High Command had made their decision, and everything was about to change. The message was short. Report to Command Hall 12 at dawn. Do-hyun did not sleep that night. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. thinking about all the ways this could end. They might expel him. They might send him back to Earth in shame. They might do worse things, things that happen to people who embarrassed powerful species. When dawn came, he dressed in his cleanest uniform and made his way through the quiet station. The corridors were empty at this hour. His footsteps echoed like a heartbeat. Command Hall 12 was smaller than the great chamber where he had faced the admirals. But it was still impressive, with high ceilings and walls covered with maps of the galaxy. At the far end stood a single desk, and behind that desk sat the Talani admiral. She was alone. "Come in, human. Sit down." Da-Hyun walked forward and took the seat she indicated. His hands were shaking slightly. He put them in his lap to hide it. "You are nervous," the admiral observed. "Yes. Good. Fear shows intelligence. Only fools feel no fear when their future is uncertain." She folded two of her arms while the other two rested on the desk. "I am Admiral Tolan. I have been asked to deliver the High Command's decision." Da-Hyun waited. "The decision was not easy. Many wanted you punished. The Voss especially feel that you insulted their honor. They demanded your expulsion and a formal apology from Earth's government." His heart sank. "But," Admiral Tolan continued, "others argued differently. I argued differently. What you found was real, human. Our engineers confirmed it. The weakness exists. It has existed for 300 years, and no one saw it until you came along." Da-Hyun looked up. Hope flickered in his chest. The question was not whether you were right. The question was what to do about it. Some believed we should bury the information, silence you, and pretend nothing had happened. This is how things have always been done. And others? Others believed this was an opportunity. You showed us that we have blind spots. You showed us that thinking only as builders makes us vulnerable. This is a valuable lesson, even if it was painful to learn. Admiral Tolan stood and walked around the desk. She moved gracefully despite her size, her forearms balanced perfectly. "The High Command has voted. The decision was close, but in the end, wisdom won over pride." She stopped in front of Da-Hyun and looked down at him with her large, dark eyes. "We are creating a new department at this academy. We are calling it the Office of Adversarial Analysis. Its purpose will be to examine our own systems, strategies, and technologies through the eyes of an enemy. To find weaknesses before our enemies do." Do-Hyun's breath caught in his throat. "And you, human designate Park Do-Hyun, will lead this department." The words did not make sense at first. He stared at the admiral, waiting for the correction, the explanation that this was a mistake. "I am a first-year student," he finally said. "You were. You have been promoted to the rank of lieutenant commander. This is unprecedented for a human and for someone so young. Many will be angry. Many will try to undermine you. But the High Command believes you have earned this chance." Da-Hyun stood slowly. His legs felt weak. "Why me? There must be others more qualified. There are many who are more experienced, more educated, more connected. But none of them saw what you saw. None of them thought to look for what you looked for." Admiral Tolan's expression softened slightly. "You think differently, human. That is your weapon. That is why we need you." She handed him a small metal badge. It showed a symbol he did not recognize. A circle with a crack running through it. "This is the emblem of your new office. A reminder that perfection is an illusion. There is always a crack. Your job is to find it." Da-Hyun took the badge. It was cold and heavy in his hand. "I will need help," he said. "I cannot do this alone. You will have resources, staff, authority to access any system in the fleet, but choose your people carefully. Not everyone will support your mission. Some will try to stop you. I already have someone in mind. A Talani student named Yuna. She helped me find the Dreadnought's weakness." Admiral Tolan nodded. "A good choice. My people value precision and detail. She will balance your creative chaos. A hint of humor entered her voice. And perhaps she will keep you from making too many enemies too quickly. The meeting ended. Do-hyun walked out of the hall in a daze. He was a lieutenant commander. He had his own department. He had authority that no human had ever held before. And he had no idea what he was doing. He found Yuna in the engineering workshop, surrounded by parts and tools. When she saw him, her eyes went to the badge on his chest. What is that? He told her everything. The admirals, the decision, the new office. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. You want me to join you, she said finally. I need you. I can see patterns, but I do not understand the technology well enough. You know how things work. Together, we can find weaknesses that neither of us would find alone. Yuna looked at her tools, at the half-built device on her workbench. Then she looked back at Do-hyun. My people will not understand. They will ask why I'm helping a human break things instead of building things. Tell them you are building something new. A better way to protect what we build. She considered this. Then, slowly, she nodded. I will help you. But if you get us both killed, I will be very annoyed. That is fair. They began that very day. Do-hyun was given an office, a small room with blank walls and a single desk. Not much to start with, but it was his. He pinned the cracked circle emblem above the door. The first weeks were hard. Many officers refused to cooperate with him. Some laughed at his requests for information. Others ignored him completely. But slowly, as he produced results, attitudes began to change. He found a minor flaw in a defense satellite network. Then a timing error in the communication systems used by patrol ships. Then a vulnerability in the identification codes that separated friend from enemy. Each discovery was small, but each one could have been used by an enemy to cause damage. And each time Do-hyun found something, the engineers fixed it, and the fleet became a little bit safer. Yuna proved invaluable. She understood systems that confused Do-hyun. She could explain complex engineering in simple terms. And she was not afraid to tell him when his ideas were wrong, which happened more often than he liked to admit. Months passed. The office grew. Other students joined, then officers, then engineers who wanted to test their own work against critical eyes. The boss remained hostile, but even they could not deny the value of what Do-hyun was doing. One evening, Yuna found him in his office, staring at a hologram of the dreadnought. It still spun slowly, just as it had that first day in class. You still look at it, she observed. It reminds me why we do this. Somewhere out there, enemies are looking for weaknesses in our systems. Every day, they get closer to finding something. Our job is to find it first. Do you ever regret what you did? Speaking up in class? Do-hyun thought about it. He remembered the fear, the anger of the boss, the cold eyes of the admirals. But he also remembered the feeling when he saw the pattern, when he understood something that others had missed. No, he said. I do not regret it. I was scared. I am still scared sometimes. But I would rather be scared and right than comfortable and blind. Yuna stood beside him, her forearms relaxed at her sides. You humans are strange, she said. You break things. You cause problems. You make powerful people angry. Yes, but perhaps that is why the galaxy needs you. Someone has to ask the uncomfortable questions. Do-hyun smiled slightly. That is what we do. We look at something everyone says is perfect, and we ask one simple question. What question? He looked at the dreadnought one more time. Then he turned off the hologram. How do I break it? Yuna made her laughing sound. And that, human, is why I follow you. Because you will never stop asking. They walked out of the office together, into the corridors of the great station. Somewhere in the galaxy, enemies were planning. Somewhere, weapons were being built and strategies were being formed. But here, in this small office with a cracked circle on the door, a human and his allies were planning too. Not building walls, but finding the cracks in walls. Not creating strength, but testing it. Because the galaxy had finally learned what humans had always known. The greatest protection is not believing you are safe, it is knowing exactly how you are not.